Wait, before you leave, I need you to do one thing for me. Don't decide who I am from the first few minutes of this conversation. Don't close this because you think you've heard words like these before, because if you leave now, there is something you will never know. And I can live with many regrets. I can live with sleepless nights. I can live with the mistakes that still visit me when the world becomes quiet. But I don't think I could live knowing that the one woman these words were meant for walked away before I finally found the courage to say them. So stay with me, just a little longer. Not because I want to convince you of anything, but because some truths only make sense after you've heard all of them. You see, people think love begins with excitement. They imagine fireworks, perfect timing, two people looking into each other's eyes, and somehow knowing everything will work out. I used to believe that too. Then life taught me something much crueler. Real love doesn't begin when two people meet. It begins the first time one of them becomes afraid of saying too much, afraid of saying too little, afraid that one wrong sentence might cause the other person to disappear forever. And that's where I have been for longer than I want to admit, living between words I wanted to say, and silence I thought would protect us both. Do you know what silence does after enough years? People think silence keeps peace. It doesn't. Silence invents stories. It convinces the other person they weren't important. It whispers that they were forgotten. It quietly builds walls where doors were supposed to exist. Maybe you've lived through that too. Maybe someone looked into your eyes one day, made you believe you mattered, and then disappeared behind excuses that never truly explained anything. Maybe you smiled while telling everyone you had moved on. But every night, just before sleep found you, there was one question you never stopped asking. Why wasn't I enough? I wish someone had answered that question for you, because sometimes the answer has nothing to do with your worth. Sometimes the person who leaves isn't running from you. They're running from the version of themselves they don't know how to fix. I know that because for a very long time that person was me. Not because I didn't know how to love, but because I believed loving someone also meant protecting them from my unfinished battles. I thought distance was kindness. I thought disappearing was sacrifice. I thought if I carried every burden alone, the woman I loved would never have to carry any of them. I was wrong, terribly wrong, because loneliness shared in silence becomes abandonment, and abandonment leaves scars no apology can erase. Have you ever wondered why some people hesitate right before happiness finally reaches them? Why they suddenly become colder, more distant, almost impossible to understand? Most people call them emotionally unavailable. Sometimes that's true, but sometimes they're simply terrified. Terrified that if you truly saw everything inside them, you would quietly decide you deserved someone easier, someone lighter, someone without memories that wake them before dawn, someone who doesn't overthink every goodbye, someone who isn't constantly waiting for life to take away the one beautiful thing it finally gave them. I know that fear. I've carried it like invisible weight. Every conversation became a test. Every smile became something I worried I couldn't keep. Every moment of happiness secretly came with another thought. How long until I lose this? It's exhausting to love while expecting loss. Maybe you've done that too. Maybe every time someone got close, instead of relaxing, you started preparing yourself for the day they'd leave. Not because they gave you a reason, but because someone else once did. It's strange how the heart remembers pain more faithfully than joy. One betrayal can echo for decades. One goodbye can rewrite the language of trust. And suddenly every new beginning feels suspicious. Every promise sounds temporary. Every "I'll stay" feels like borrowed time. I don't want borrowed time with you. I want something slower, quieter, the kind of connection that doesn't depend on perfect days, because life never promises perfect days. One morning we'll wake up laughing. Another morning one of us might be carrying grief too heavy to explain. There will be misunderstandings. There will be moments when pride begs us to stay silent. There will be nights when exhaustion speaks louder than kindness. That's when love becomes real. Not when everything is easy, but when leaving seems easier and we choose each other anyway. Can I ask you something? When was the last time someone fought to understand you instead of trying to change you? When was the last time someone listened long enough to hear the sentence you never actually spoke? When was the last time someone looked beyond your strength and noticed how tired you really were? I wonder how many years you've spent pretending you're okay, especially after everyone started calling you strong. Strength is a strange compliment. People stop checking on strong people. They assume strength means healing. It doesn't. Sometimes strength is simply becoming good at hiding the places that still hurt. I know because I became an expert at it. I learned how to smile while carrying questions that never left. I learned how to celebrate victories that felt strangely empty because there was no one beside me who truly understood what they had cost. Successes can be loud, loneliness is quieter, but loneliness almost always wins the argument. There were rooms full of people where I felt completely invisible. There were achievements everyone applauded. Yet all I could think was, I wish one person knew what I sacrificed to stand here. Not to admire me, just to understand me. Understanding. That's rarer than love. Many people will say they love you. Few will stay curious enough to understand why you cry over things everyone else calls small. Why certain songs make you silent. Why anniversaries nobody remembers still make your chest feel heavy. Why some mornings begin with sadness, even though nothing terrible happened. Love without understanding becomes performance. Understanding without love becomes observation. But together, they become home, and maybe that's what we've both been searching for all along. Not perfection, not excitement, not another beginning that looks beautiful for a season and disappears when life becomes inconvenient. Maybe we've simply been looking for someone who stays, someone who says, I don't understand everything you're feeling yet, but I'm not leaving while I learn. Do you know how healing those words would have been years ago? They could have changed entire chapters of my life. Maybe yours too. There is something else I need to admit. Something I should have admitted long before today. Sometimes I imagined meeting you years earlier, before disappointments shaped us, before caution became our second language, before we both learned how expensive trust could become. Would we have loved differently? Would we have wasted less time pretending we didn't care? Or were we always meant to meet only after life had humbled us enough to recognize what truly matters? I don't know. What I do know is this. The older I became, the less interested I was in temporary emotions. I stopped searching for butterflies. Butterflies disappear. Peace remains. I wanted the kind of woman whose presence could quiet the noise inside me without saying a single word, not because she fixed me, but because I finally felt safe enough to stop pretending. If these words have reached something inside your heart, if you've ever felt unseen while surrounded by people, then quietly subscribe and tell me where in the world you're listening from. Somehow, it comforts me to know these thoughts have found you. You know what's strange? For most of my life, I believed timing was everything. Meet the right person at the wrong time, and love loses. Meet the wrong person at the right time, and confusion wins. But lately I've started wondering if timing was never the real problem. Maybe fear was. Fear dressed itself as patience. Fear called itself responsibility. Fear convinced us to wait until we were perfect, and perfection never arrived. How many beautiful lives have been lived half-heartedly because two people kept waiting for a version of themselves that was never going to exist? How many I love you remained trapped behind polite conversations? How many hands almost reached for each other, then stopped? Because rejection felt more terrifying than regret. I don't want to spend the rest of my life wondering what would have happened if I had simply been honest. Not with the world, with you. Because there is something I've been carrying for longer than you realize. Something that has followed me into every quiet moment. Something I haven't had the courage to place into words. And the closer I get to saying it, the more I fear what it might change. Because once the truth is spoken, neither of us will ever be able to return to the comfort of not knowing. There is something I have never admitted out loud, because the moment these words leave me, they stop being thoughts and become consequences. I haven't told you the real reason yet, not because I wanted to manipulate your emotions, not because I wanted to keep you waiting, but because I needed you to understand the man speaking before you understood the decision that almost destroyed him. You see, everyone believes the hardest choice in love is deciding whether to stay. It isn't. The hardest choice is deciding whether you deserve to stay. That question has followed me longer than any success, longer than any dream, longer than any ambition I ever chased. People looked at me and assumed confidence came naturally. They saw certainty because I learned how to wear it. They heard conviction because I practiced speaking before I ever practiced feeling. They thought I always knew where I was going. They never saw the conversations that happened when the room became silent, the arguments I had with myself, the moments when I questioned whether someone as extraordinary as you deserved a man carrying so many unfinished battles. I told myself I was protecting you, but if I am honest, I was protecting myself from the possibility that you might look at everything I was hiding and quietly decide I wasn't enough. Fear has a remarkable talent. It disguises itself as wisdom. It tells you to wait, to prepare, to become stronger, to become richer, to become calmer, to become someone impossible to reject. And while you spend years becoming, life quietly passes by. Tell me something. Have you ever delayed happiness because you believed you had to earn it first? Have you ever convinced yourself that love should wait until every problem was solved? How many birthdays disappeared while you were waiting? How many sunsets ended without someone beside you because you believed tomorrow would be a better day to open your heart? Tomorrow is a beautiful liar. It promises certainty while stealing today's courage. That realization came to me much later than it should have. By then, I had already become someone who could solve impossible problems at work, but struggled to answer a simple message from the woman who mattered most. Not because I didn't care, because I cared too much. Every reply became important, every sentence carried weight, every pause convinced me I had already ruined everything. The more someone means to you, the more dangerous every word begins to feel. Maybe you've experienced that. Maybe you've stared at your phone, rewriting one message 10 different times, not because you didn't know what to say, but because losing that person felt unbearable. That is what fear does. It transforms ordinary conversations into emotional minefields. Eventually, I reached a point where silence felt safer. I hated that silence, but I kept choosing it, until one day I realized silence has its own language. It says, "You weren't worth explaining," even when that isn't true. If I could erase one habit from my life, it wouldn't be overworking. It wouldn't be perfectionism. It wouldn't even be doubt. It would be believing that people I loved could somehow read the feelings I refused to express. They couldn't. No one can. Love is not telepathy. Love needs courage, and courage is rarely loud. Sometimes courage is simply saying, "I'm afraid." Do you know how many relationships collapse because neither person admits they're scared? One pretends not to care. The other pretends they're fine. 2 performances. No intimacy. Just distance wearing beautiful smiles. I promised myself I would never build that kind of love again. And then, something happened that I never expected. Someone entered my life who made everything I believed about emotional safety begin to change. She wasn't louder than anyone else. She wasn't trying to impress me. She wasn't asking me to become someone different. She simply existed with a kind of quiet honesty that made pretending feel exhausting. For the first time, I wanted to be completely known. That terrified me, because being known means giving someone the power to leave after seeing the parts you've hidden from everyone else. Do you know what I almost did? I almost walked away. First, not because I stopped loving her, because I believed she would eventually stop loving me. Imagine how tragic that is. Ending something beautiful before it has the chance to prove your fears wrong. That was the edge I stood on. One decision away from creating another regret that would have followed me for the rest of my life. You might think this sounds irrational. It is. Fear rarely makes logical decisions. It makes emotional predictions based on old wounds. A broken heart remembers yesterday so vividly that it struggles to believe tomorrow can be different. Then something happened that shook me even more. I watched another couple. They had been together for decades. Their hair had turned silver. Their hands carried wrinkles instead of rings that sparkled. People walking past them probably saw nothing remarkable. But I watched the husband slow his steps because his wife was tired. I watched him answer questions she hadn't finished asking. I watched her straighten his collar without thinking. No grand speeches, no dramatic declaration, just thousands of ordinary moments that had quietly become extraordinary because neither of them stopped choosing the other. That image refused to leave my mind. I wasn't jealous of their history. I was jealous of their consistency. That is when I realized I had spent years chasing unforgettable moments, while overlooking the quiet decisions that actually create forever. Forever isn't built by one unforgettable day. It's built by ordinary Tuesdays when someone still chooses kindness, by difficult mornings when someone still says, "I'm here," by nights when misunderstanding could become distance, but instead becomes another conversation. I wanted that, more than achievement, more than recognition, more than anything I had convinced myself mattered, and yet I still hesitated, because another voice kept whispering inside me, what if she isn't the one? It wasn't because she lacked anything. It was because certainty never arrives dressed as certainty. It arrives disguised as risk. There was even a moment, one I am ashamed to admit, when I convinced myself that perhaps choosing someone easier would protect me. Someone who required less vulnerability, someone who admired me but never challenged me, someone who loved the image instead of the man. For a brief moment, I almost believed that was enough. I almost chose comfort over connection. I almost confused admiration with intimacy. That may have been the greatest mistake I nearly made, because then I asked myself one question that changed everything. Who will still recognize me after success becomes ordinary? Who will still sit beside me after disappointment? Who will still reach for my hand when the world no longer applauds? The answer wasn't the woman who made life easier. It was the woman who made honesty unavoidable, and that realization broke something inside me. Not because it hurt, because it exposed how close I had come to losing the only kind of love that could have lasted. I wish I could tell you that everything became simple after that. It didn't. The closer I came to choosing with my whole heart, the louder my fears became. What if I failed her? What if one day she looked at me with disappointment instead of warmth? What if my silence returned? What if my old habits won? Those questions kept me awake more nights than I can count. Then came the moment I never expected, a day when I genuinely believed I had already lost her. Nothing dramatic happened. No shouting. No cruel words, just something far more frightening, distant, the kind that grows so quietly, you only notice it after it has already settled between two hearts. Our conversations became shorter. Our pauses became longer. The warmth I once felt began slipping through my fingers. For the first time, I realized love doesn't usually disappear in one catastrophic moment. It fades through tiny unattended moments. Unspoken gratitude, delayed apologies, assumed affection, forgotten reassurance. I remember sitting alone, asking myself a question I had avoided for years. What if this silence becomes permanent? The thought hollowed me, not because I feared being alone, because I feared becoming another unfinished chapter in the life of the woman I never wanted to hurt. And, in that unbearable quiet, I finally understood something I had spent years refusing to believe: love cannot survive inside intentions. It survives inside actions, not tomorrow, not eventually, today. That realization demanded something from me I had postponed for far too long. Claimed honesty. Even if honesty meant risking everything. Even if the truth had the power to change both of our lives forever. Because there is still one confession I haven't placed into your hands. One truth that explains every hesitation, every silence, every moment I almost walked away. And once you hear it, you'll understand why I believed losing you might have been the punishment I deserved all along. There is no gentle way to say what I have been carrying. I kept searching for the perfect moment to tell you, believing that if the timing was right, the truth would somehow hurt less. I was wrong. Some truths don't become easier because we wait, they become heavier. And every day I stayed silent, I wasn't protecting us. I was building another wall between us. The confession I have hidden from you has never been about another woman. It has never been about a secret life. It has never been about a promise I made to someone else. It has always been about me. About the man who spent years believing that love had to be earned through perfection instead of received through honesties. I believed that if you ever saw every fear I carried, every regret that still followed me, every mistake I replayed when I couldn't sleep, you would eventually realize that your future would be brighter without me. So before you could make that decision, I nearly made it for you. I almost became the reason we never had a chance. Do you know how heartbreaking that realization is? To discover that the greatest threat to the love you've been praying for isn't distance. It isn't time. It isn't another person. It's the voice inside your own mind convincing you that you're impossible to love. For years, that voice sounded reasonable. It spoke softly. It disguised itself as logic. It said, "She deserves someone stronger. She deserves someone simpler. She deserves someone who doesn't hesitate." And every time I listened to it, I moved one step farther away from the very future I wanted to build. Then one evening, something happened that changed me forever. I imagined us years from now, not in some perfect house, not on an extraordinary vacation, not standing beneath fireworks or celebrating another achievement. I imagined something so ordinary that most people would never notice it. 2 chairs. A quiet evening. Gray hair. Wrinkled hands. A conversation that drifted slowly from memories to silence, because neither of us needed to fill every moment with words. And suddenly I asked myself one question. If I reached that day, who would I regret not fighting for? The answer came immediately. It was you. Not because life with you would be easy, because life without you would always contain an empty place that no accomplishment could ever fill. People spend so much of their lives chasing extraordinary moments. Yet when they look back, they don't remember the awards. They don't remember the promotions. They don't remember the applause. They remember who sat beside them when they cried, who laughed at the same stories 100 times, who stayed during seasons that offered nothing in return. Love isn't measured by intensity. It's measured by endurance, by the quiet decision to remain kind after disappointment, to choosing curiosity instead of assumption, by asking, "Tell me what you're feeling," instead of deciding you already know. Can I ask you something? If someone truly knew every version of you, the confident one, the exhausted one, the hopeful one, the frightened one, the one who smiles while secretly grieving, would you believe them if they still said, "I choose you," or would you spend the rest of your life wondering when they were going to change their mind? That question haunted me, because I realized I wasn't only afraid of losing love, I was afraid of receiving it completely. Receiving real love means surrendering control. You can no longer protect yourself by pretending not to care. You can no longer keep one foot outside the door. You become vulnerable. You trust another heart with pieces of yourself that cannot be replaced. That is terrifying. But do you know what is even more terrifying? Living an entire lifetime behind emotional armor so heavy that no one ever truly meets you. Safety without intimacy becomes another form of loneliness. I don't want to survive love. I want to experience it completely, even if that means risking heartbreak, because heartbreak heals. Regret lingers. There was one final moment that forced me to choose. Not between two women, not between love and ambition, between fear and truth. I realized I could continue waiting until I felt ready, or I could accept that readiness is often created only after courage comes first. So I stopped negotiating with fear. I stopped asking whether I deserved happiness. I stopped searching for guarantees that don't exist. Instead, I asked myself a different question. If today became my final opportunity to tell you everything, would I be proud of the silence I protected, or ashamed of the words I never spoke? The answer broke me, because I suddenly understood that love isn't destroyed only by betrayal. Sometimes it's destroyed by hesitation, by assuming there will always be another conversation, another morning, another chance. Life has never promised us another chance. That's why I am speaking now. Not because I know what your answer would be, but because I finally understand that honesty is an act of love, even when it carries the possibility of rejection. If you looked into my eyes today and told me that your heart had chosen another path, it would hurt more deeply than I can describe, but even then, I would be grateful that I finally stopped hiding, because love deserves truth more than it deserves comfort. And if, somehow, your heart still found its way toward mine, I would make you one promise, not that I would never fail. I will, not that I would never disappoint you. There will be days when I do, not that life will become simple, it won't. My promise is something quieter than perfection. When misunderstanding arrives, I will choose conversation. When pride asks me to become silent, I will choose honesty. When fear tells me to run, I will remember everything it has already stolen from me. When life becomes heavy, I will not carry the burden alone while pretending I'm protecting you. I will let you stand beside me, because partnership isn't built by hiding weakness, it's built by trusting someone enough to witness it. I don't want a love that exists only during beautiful seasons. I want the kind of love that survives ordinary mornings, difficult winters, unexpected losses, changing dreams, aging faces, slower steps, and quieter nights. I want the kind of love where we never stop asking each other, "What do you need from me today?" Because the answer won't always be the same. Some days you'll need encouragement. Some days you'll need patience. Some days you'll need laughter. Some days you'll need silence with someone who refuses to leave, and, on the days when one of us forgets who we are, the other will remember. That is what forever means to me. Not endless romance, endless choosing, again and again and again. So, if you have spent years believing that you were too late, too complicated, too broken, or too difficult to be deeply loved, please hear this one final truth. The right love does not arrive looking for a flawless person. It arrives looking for an honest one. Someone willing to stay when pretending would be easier. Someone brave enough to replace assumptions with conversations. Someone who understands that lasting love is not found. It is built, one truthful moment at a time. If these words have found the place in your heart that has been waiting quietly for someone to understand it, then perhaps this conversation was never an accident. Perhaps we were never meant to leave carrying unanswered questions. Perhaps the greatest risk was never loving too deeply. Perhaps it was waiting so long to admit that love, at its strongest, is simply two imperfect people refusing to let fear make their decisions. And if there is one thing I hope you remember after my voice fades into silence, let it be this: never measure your worth by the people who walked away before they truly knew you. Measure it by your willingness to keep your heart open, despite every reason it had to close, because that kind of courage changes lives. It certainly changed mine.